Another day at I Dream of Indie Games and another game that I'm sure absolutely no other content creator is talking about. But here we are with the Super Catboy. And you know, if you take a look at this game, it definitely reminds you of the 90s. Yes, the 90s were a blast. Sure, had its problems, and Pawsome, the TV show, kind of sucked, but I'll be damned if it wasn't a special time for video games, particularly 2D platformers. Super Mario, Earthworm Jim, Gex, Bubsy the Bobcat? Alright, so they didn't all reach the heights of our mustachioed friend, but there is a nostalgia factor to many of these games, even if they weren't all as amazing as maybe our memories think they were. Alas, it's 2023 at the time of this review, and there's a new cat in town, Super Catboy indeed, which I would say is a tribute to all sorts of 16-bit 90s platformers. It's got a little bit of Donkey Kong Country, a splash of Mega Man, and yeah, it even unlocked a few memories of Bubsy that I thought were long lost. I kind of feel bad about this release because it feels like it's coming out of nowhere with not a lot of marketing behind it, but that's a shame because this is actually a pretty fun little title. Our tale begins, yes, cat tail, there's kind of a joke in there somewhere, with a flying aircraft overrun with villainous dogs who have captured Catboy, trapping him in a capsule. Kind of like Weapon X, if you comic nerds out there catch that reference. Suddenly, the ship catches fire, it's sent crashing down below, and our adventure with Super Catboy begins as he escapes and meets his sidekick, Weapon Girl, who equips our feline friend with a gun. Cats and guns, who would have thought? Now, armed with your cat clawing abilities, a weapon, and the ability to pounce on enemies, you'll platform your way through over 20 levels ranging from snowy landscapes to factories, and of course, a train. Remember when I mentioned Bubsy earlier? That game totally had a train level. I swear it, somebody look it up. It's in my memory for some reason. Either way, I like the characters and world of Super Catboy, however, I feel like the writing wasn't the best match for their personalities. Something felt a bit lost in translation, with humor that often missed the mark, which is a bit of a shame because I feel like the developers really could have leaned into that whole 90s era sense of humor. Instead, you'll get a relatively bland story that lacks personality. Sorry, even the villain of this game, kind of lame, and you don't even fight the villain per se at the end, but regardless, I liked Super Catboy, I liked his sidekick, and I like some of the characters that show up, but I didn't care for the writing. Thankfully, Super Catboy excels where it counts, because you're honestly probably not here for the story anyways, but in the gameplay department, this is a pretty good little 2D action platformer. As I mentioned, Catboy has a few standard attacks, with the gun adding a fun element to the gameplay, though most enemies aren't going to put up all that much of a challenge either way. The brainless dogs that you'll encounter, which are your enemies throughout, don't really do all that much except walk back and forth and look menacing. You can easily duck under their bullets, you can shoot them from a distance, or you can strike them with your cat paws. The game's platforming sections feel great thanks to the responsiveness of the controls, and Catboy will eventually pick up other abilities. Well, really one main ability. That's kind of disappointing. It's a dash. That's nice, but I would have liked to have had more as you progress through the game. Instead, we encounter just a small handful of different guns, and they're really only used for a few short sections of the game. That's a bummer because most of the guns are really cool and fun to use. Still, whether you're jumping from ropes to dodge spiders or battling forward against the wind, kinda like our old pal Storm Eagle back in the day, Super Catboy feels pretty great. That said, if you're familiar with platforming games at all, you're going to dominate this one in a little over 2 hours, though players will have the ability to return to completed levels where they can collect missing items and coins, as the game does have a few hidden secrets throughout. At the end of each level, you'll be shown how many coins you collected, enemies you've defeated, and secret cat parts that you've found, which are fairly well hidden, but not exactly super difficult to find. Level design is quite good despite the lack of challenge, with decent variety in the environments, callbacks to Donkey Kong Country, the one difficulty spike in Super Catboy have you riding on a minecart, that was fun, or you might even be taking down doggies on a motorcycle. So overall, the pacing of the game is pretty good in terms of action, with a few boss encounters as well, which again are extremely easy. And normally I'm the last guy to complain about difficulty in a game, but it would be nice if players at least had the ability to increase the challenge, which at the time of this review didn't appear to be an option. But speaking of options, accessibility is fairly limited here. There's just a small handful of graphics and audio settings, and that's really about it. Visuals in Super Catboy, on the other hand, are outstanding, utilizing that 16-bit pixelated art with fun enemy designs, which are mostly different breeds of dogs, and there's some really outstanding animations that bring this cartoonish world to life. life, unlike the script of the game. The soundtrack is also phenomenal throughout, with most worlds having an original tune. These songs reminded me a lot of the Donkey Kong Country series in that they are maybe a little out of place at times, but it works because they are just so damn melodic and infectious. There's quite a few tracks as well, and I love them all. Super Catboy's soundtrack ended up being one of my favorites of 2023 thus far. One might even say it's paw-tastic. The game's sound effects are pretty solid as well, with a nice little coin collecting noise, all sorts of buzzes and beeps going on. It comes together nicely and fits the aesthetic of the game, that good old retro sound. It's lovely. Characters aren't voiced, but maybe that's a good thing with the script being kind of meh. Though, in my head, I wanted Super Catboy and Weapon Girl to sound like zany over-the-top cartoon characters of the 90s, but that's just me. While our time together was ultimately brief, I really enjoyed playing through Super Catboy. It has great bones with good mechanics, fun levels, excellent visuals, and lovely sound design. It was over a bit too soon, yes. Could have used a few more upgrades for your character, and the story falls kind of flat, but in the end, if you love classic platformers, this is a great one to consider adding to your library, even if it only lasts you about 4 to 5 hours total if you go for the 100%. But hell, games we consider classics were often pretty short, though well recommended overall. I feel like I'll be seeing this on a lot of hidden indie gems lists in the future.